Ladies and gentlemen, for the final session of the afternoon, introducing Dr. Bhavna Shyamalan and M. Night Shyamalan, co-founders of MNS Foundation, hosted by Tom McGrath.
Welcome to ThinkFest.
Thank you.
Actually, welcome back to ThinkFest. You were nice enough to join us last year, and we are excited to have you back here. And we're thrilled that Bhavna can join us this year as well.
Thank you.
This is great. So I know you actually need no introduction, but I'm going to do a little introduction anyway, just to refresh people's memory. So Night Shyamalan is an internationally renowned writer and director, creator of such movies as The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable Signs, After Earth, all of which I think were shot in the Philadelphia region.
Yep.
In addition, he's the author of the book I Got Schooled, a fascinating book which focuses on the 5 keys in closing the education gap, which is why you were here last year talking about education. Dr. Bhavna Shyamalan has her doctorate in clinical developmental psychology from Bryn Mawr College. They're here, though, not to talk about movies or psychology, but to talk a little bit about the work of the M. Night Shyamalan Foundation, which supports remarkable leaders around the world who are working to remove the barriers created by poverty and inequality. So I'm excited to talk about the work of your foundation, about philanthropy, about all the issues that are associated with this, but I want to start with a little more of a TMZ approach to this.
Classy.
Yeah, that's good. I'm actually just curious. You guys are such an amazing couple. How did you two meet?
Well,
I'll let him do that story.
with all great love stories, it started with a stripper.
It actually did. Not me.
In college, my roommate got a stripper to come to the dorm room, and I'm a guy, so she was dancing, and so she was dancing for me when we got busted. And so the RA came in, busted, said, "You get over here," and I was like, "Oh no," and I was like, I'm Indian, so this is like the end of the world if they call my parents. So I go down, I'm charming the RA, and then he brings me in front of the dean, and I'm like, "Please." And then he's like, "This is a very serious thing you did. And, I'm not going to rat out my roommate, So I was like, "Please, please, please." And they're like, "We're going to have to call your parents." And I was like, "Okay, you can call my parents if you can look me in the eye and say you wouldn't have accepted the dance at my age, the lap dance." And then they both started laughing, and the RA turned out to become my really, really good friend, and this was his girlfriend.
Oops.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you. Oh, what a great story. I'm so glad I asked that question. Who knew there would be strippers
You didn't know
involved?
what you were getting into.
No, I did not. So, okay. All right, let's get serious here for a minute. Unless you want to keep talking about strippers, that's fine. So, you guys started this foundation, I think, back in 2001. What's interesting to me is that I think you didn't start this thing and it was fully formed and you knew exactly what you were doing. You've had a little bit of a journey along the way here. So I'm curious if you just sort of tell us a little bit about the idea that you started with, but also sort of the path you've taken over the last decade or so in terms of the foundation itself.
Sure, you want to start?
Yeah, I think, it really began early on with just kind of, we both have parents that are involved in a lot of kind of volunteerism and work, and so it was always in our culture and just in the things that we did. As you discussed, I got my degree in clinical psychology and was working as a therapist, but I kind of found it a little bit, narrow. I wanted to broaden the scope and maybe do something more and have a broader impact. So we talked about starting a foundation. But, I wasn't trained in it, he wasn't trained in it, and his philosophy is always jump feet first, just go in and start. So we went in and started. He wanted to focus on Philadelphia because this is where he grew up, and we wanted to have a little international piece as well because I'm from Hong Kong and everything. And we just started to do, but we made tons of mistakes. And
Talk about some of the mistakes you made. I'm curious about this.
Well, I think ultimately almost every foundation goes through the same arc. I mean, at least the ones that I've talked to, You kind of start with naive assumptions of, I guess you're gonna write a check and everything's gonna be great, And then you kind of go to the next naive step in the ladder of learning of, well, let's do more research and not just, write the check to a name that we know and that's the end of it. And then you have the kind of the hubris of the, what generally is called, like the white man syndrome. We're going to come in and save everybody. We have to change that name because we're not white, so whatever that syndrome is.
And you're not both men
yes,
either.
Yes, yes, exactly. It's that syndrome. We had that syndrome, where you come in and you're like, well, it's so easy. You just do this. So we're going to put money towards this, and you see the money just dissipate and have very, very little impact. So we probably did a couple of things that we, used a lot of money on and had very little impact. One of them was low-income housing in Philly, and we tried to, put a lot of money into basically, to stop the gentrification of certain areas as the poor people were getting kicked out, and subsidize low-income housing for them, and then they could stay there, and then they would have those housing, as part of their value for their life. But it just didn't turn out to be that way, the way we did it, and we probably lost $1 million doing that. Nothing came of that, and then we started giving scholarships, and that was good, but it was.
I'm curious, did you ever get to the point on this path where you think, you know what, this stuff doesn't work the way we think? Why are we doing this? Let's just put our money back in the bank and pass it along to our kids. Did you ever feel like you wanted to give up on this?
No, actually,
No, I don't think so.
I think at each point we kind of learned a little bit along the way, and so we found different paths. From going from a big, multi-million-dollar grant, we started to look small, and we started to look at impact. You meet people along the way. We actually ended up hiring someone who did know what she was doing, Jen Walters, Michael, who's running our foundation. And we started to really hone in, do the research, do the work. We were in it for the long haul, and there was a way, we just hadn't known the way yet. So we became smarter about our philanthropy. We became smarter and narrower about our model. Both for the international piece and focused on what we wanted to do domestically. We wanted to go more from the Band-Aid approaches to solutions.
Talk a little bit, sort of describe the foundation and the way it runs now and sort of really what the focus is right now.
You want to kind of tell the structure of it?
Yeah, so there's two arms to the foundation. There's the international arm and the domestics. The international is kind of where I put my focus on, and the domestic, so you'll talk about that.
Yeah, I'll talk about that.
The international piece is really where we focus on leaders. So we look for individuals that are changing the world, and we support them. They are often grassroots leaders that emerge from their communities, or are people that, end up dedicating their lives to bringing a community out of poverty. They're already vetted by the world. They've made an incredible difference with very little resource. They're dedicated. They will never stop, and we just come in and say, what do you need? And then we support them multi-year grants, and in multiple ways. It's not just about money, it's about sort of building their capacity, and helping them find more funders, helping them build their own skills in doing the work. So we're getting much more involved in these leaders in a broad sense.
So that's the international part.
That's the international part.
It actually dovetails domestic as well. We do that with all leaders around the world, including domestic. So if a domestic leader came up that was vetted by life, by that we mean by vetted by life that's the opposite of that white man savior syndrome that we were talking about. I'll find a better name for it. And so we've found that when, like, say someone in a community emerges and let's say you read about them, and Nicholas Kristof wrote about somebody, that did something amazing, and in some country somewhere, and they've achieved something, they've opened a school, or they've stopped corruption, or whatever they've done. Then these guys, Jen and Bob, they go fly there, vet it, to see how real it is and what they need and how impressed they are. Do they have a vision? Do they have a 5-year thing? What do they need? And then we support them, so it's not coming from the outside. And we have found that has an exponential effect on your resources when you put that in. It has an incredible sticky effect. You're coming from the local understanding of it, the local leader. You're not bringing in and displacing or imposing something on them. And then so domestically, That also, we've done Found Leaders domestic, and one in Philly in particular. And domestically, we focus in on education simply because you can only focus in on so many things, and it's my particular area of interest. And one thing we should probably say is I really don't have a lot of interest in philanthropy until Bhavna started forcing me to think about other people. And so
It was all strippers for you until this moment.
It was all strippers and fun before that. And so she started getting me thinking about it. And then as what happens with philanthropy is once you actually have a personal experience, you start to care for yourself. You know, it's not an idea, it becomes something that you get outraged about, or something that, you know, it becomes very important to you. And ultimately, I think that we have found the number one thing that people need in philanthropy is human capital, not necessarily your money. You know, they need your time.
Talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you mean that they need your
So,
time?
like, we wouldn't necessarily, you know, need you to donate to our foundation, although you should, by the way. But your expertise, your particular expertise in gathering people and showcasing this, you know, if we had a leader, we could maybe, hey, do you want to write about it and talk to your staff and things like that. Your particular thing is your craft, your particular thing that you can bring is more valuable than just the money, right? And in the same way for us. So for me, the human capital part, let's say in my example of what I was saying for Tom, so the education piece became like an obsession, and you know, Philly in particular, and I wanted to focus in on the schools, and there's like 118 high poverty, low performing schools in Philly, and focusing in on that group of 118 schools, and what is it? How can you close the gap between them and the white suburban schools that we have amazing schools here in Philly? How can we close that gap? And that, you know, putting my mind to that, and not my money, but my mind to it. And so that was, you know, 5 years of putting your mind to it to help the situation.
I think it's also true in the international sphere in terms of our foundation, because we're investing in leaders. So those are the people that are putting in all that time, the nonstop thinking about what it takes to bring their communities out of poverty. And Jen and I, when we find a potential international grantee, we don't just, you know, look at their website and do some due diligence. We actually go to the site. So we do site visits, we stay in the community for a day or 2 or 3 to really get a sense of the work that's being done. And we spend time with the leaders thinking through what are their barriers, what are their obstacles that they're meeting, how can we help them further their work. So that's about the human capital, that's about the time that it takes, and not just the money.
You guys seem to have worked with some remarkable leaders, particularly on the international side. So one of them, and I hope I'm pronouncing this, is Valentino Ashek Deng, who folks might know, who was Dave Eggers told his story in the book, What is the What? I'm just curious, you know, are any of these stories that stand out for you, or that you think are worth sharing, just to sort of tell people, again, give them a sense of the kind of work that is being done?
All of them.
Oh my
all
God,
of
yeah.
them are ridiculously amazing. I mean, every single person, it's an honor to get to spend any time with any of these individuals. They're like saints, you know, that are walking amongst us.
Yeah, they're so inspiring and so humbling at the same time. I mean, each one of them, or at least most of them, have been through circumstances we would never even imagine for ourselves. And, you know, like Valentino himself was one of the lost boys. He was, you know, a refugee for a while from the South Sudan, you know, the conflict that was happening there. He got displaced from his family, was in a refugee camp for many, many years, ended up in the United States, got an education, and I don't know, somehow found his way to being seen and noticed. And this book was written by him, and now he started a secondary school in South Sudan. We have this James Kofi Annan. He's an ex-slave, child slave in the fishing industry in Ghana. He was there for, I think, a period of 7 years, 8 years, from the age of 7 to 14 when he finally escaped. He found a way to learn to read by borrowing books, and got himself an education, started working in a bank, and now is dedicating his whole life to rescuing other child slaves. I mean, these are people that have been through the worst of circumstance, have zero resources, sometimes never even an education, but then do incredible things.
You should talk about Katie. They probably know Katie.
Yeah, you probably know one of our leaders, Katie Milo, who is right now in Liberia. She actually is from New Jersey. She also grew up in a broken family in what she at first considered poverty, a poor home, but then dedicated her life to being a volunteer, volunteered in many different things, ended up in Liberia one time, and started to see that she worked around a community called West Point, which is now where all the Ebola crisis is occurring. And it's one of the hugest, most dismal, biggest slums that you can find, a dark, dark place. And she started to encounter the girls being trafficked or needing to use, their bodies for gaining.
Yeah, get through life.
To get
gain
through
whatever
life.
standard there,
yeah,
right?
so
it's a given.
she started to help them one girl at a time and has now built a school. She's working on building a boarding school. When the Ebola crisis began to break, she was actually in the United States and went back. So she's there now, and she's, focused on she's made a makeshift ambulance to get the girls to the hospital. These are just people that find a way. They won't stop. They find a way. It doesn't matter, how.
Yeah, so we kind of jump in. So basically, it's almost like if, the way we invest in money and we say, hey, we want to invest in this hedge fund or, mutual fund because they've vetted, right, theoretically. They've vetted the investments, and so we're going to get a better return on investments. We're that for the, smaller philanthropy groups that you may not know about. Your philanthropy money is going to have a much higher yield because of the vetting that these ladies have done.
So it's that good housekeeping seal of approval
Yeah.
in some way, yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the whole white man's savior thing, which
Yeah.
is an interesting notice, but you even have a sort of another level of this, which is the sort of Hollywood savior version of this to some extent. And I'm curious how you think celebrity plays into this.
Yeah.
And I've read quotes from Bono from U2 saying that he views celebrity as currency, that
Yes.
I should be able to use this for something.
Right.
Is that one of the ways that you think about this?
I have found it, I'm very uncomfortable with this part of it. Like, they've even, I wouldn't even raise money for our fund. I was like, I'll just give the money. That's what we've been doing. I'll just give the money. And they've, kind of got me out of the comfort zone of saying, hey, look, there's more to be done and more people can help, and you got to get out of this feeling of that you're, being uncomfortable. I don't like it when I see my peers schlepping for every single thing, like that. Because I guess when I feel uncomfortable, the same way I guess you guys feel uncomfortable is like because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you know anything about anything else, right? And so when I actually do my talks on the book, I go, let's just start here. You shouldn't listen to any celebrity. Okay, now listen to me. and I go, basically I'm going to say, pretend everything I'm saying is horse shit, and I'm going to go through every piece of research over the next 5 years and convince you from the research to see, and you can see, that kind of thing. So before I even spoke up, I wanted to make sure that it was about that. Now, the power of celebrity is we can aim the light right next to all these wonderful people, so like we had an event where Katie came and we said, hey, we believe in this lady. Can she talk to you? So it was a room like this, and she talked, and 45 minutes later, she had $30,000, right, for her kids and for her school and all of that stuff. And so that's how you can use celebrity in a good way. Now, with education, it even had a more interesting turn on it. So I was researching all this stuff on education gap and everything that was involved, and all the experts in the country. And so I just pick up the phone and I'd call the chancellor of some city and I'd say, hey, you're doing some innovative, can I come? Would you have dinner with me? And they'd say yes. Or whoever it was, the head of this, the head of that, head of this, and can I tour your school? Can I do this? Can I do that? And there's an openness because you have a certain imprimatur that they believe in. So you're not just some guy who's going to waste their time. So I got access to a lot of information very, very quickly, and everybody was very candid. And I could ask difficult questions, without offending them. And so I think I could glean the knowledge a little faster and a little quicker because of this thing that I can call a senator and sit down and say, hey, I need to talk to you about this.
Use your celebrity as a force for good.
Yeah, they know. The thing about celebrities, you have a one-way relationship, and so now I'm trying to create a two-way relationship, saying, great, I know you know me. Now I want to know what you do, everything about you.
You mentioned research before, and my understanding is that you've had some impact on this. I mean, if you have a PhD in clinical psychology, you've done some research, right? So talk a little bit about that's how that's impacted the work that you guys are doing, just that research approach to things.
Yeah, definitely for me. I mean, I think it's also the PhD, but it's also how I, and sometimes I think women approach things as different from men. He's the jump feet first. I'm the wait, let's research. You know, let's read everything there is possible to read about this and know everything. But I think it's really become, I mean, it became the cornerstone of how we approach education reform. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, but one of the things that he's been able to say is that in the book, we're saying none of it is opinion, because we don't really know anything, but we're telling you what the research has to say. And the power of that has been incredible out in the field, because this is a very hot button topic, and people get very passionate and upset about the issues. But what we're saying is let's take a step back and see what the data says. And there's a lot of data out there. And when you do that, you can actually have a much more logical, cool approach to it. This is what works. You know, it's as simple as that. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, it's helped me. I expected when I jumped into the field of education reform to just, you know, it was going to be bloody, you know, as it seems to be with everything in that field. And it just hasn't been that way. It just hasn't been that way because the data actually supports a bunch of both sides, and it dismisses a bunch of both sides. So, and again, I'm like, I don't have an opinion. I'm just telling you the data doesn't support you. I said, and sometimes I just joke with them. I'm like, I'm with you. The data doesn't support either of us. So I don't know what we're going to do about it. I say, all I'm trying to tell you is that no matter how, I know your grandma lived to 108 smoking's still bad for you. So that's what the data says. I know your grandma's doing great and it's all good, but the data still says that you shouldn't smoke. And that's all I'm saying. Continue to smoke. Knock yourself out, you know? And so we just keep on keeping that spirit to it, kind of going, this is what data says, this is what the data says. And it makes it less, threatening for everybody. And so, like, both sides, I'm like, again, as I said, it supports a lot of both sides. So I'm like, you guys are doing a lot of right and some not great stuff that's counterintuitive to what the data says. And so it's been as much as it can be a bomb, it's been a saving grace a little bit for our interactions. And again, I think knowledge is something that takes a little bit of time, for it to seep into your bones and your habit. And it's not going to turn around no matter how much I tell you smoking's bad for you. I think we have a friend here who would argue with me about smoking, but I won't point her out. That would be a terrible, sinful thing to do. So, it takes a long time to convince people to do things that the data says are healthy for you. But that's our job, is to just scream as loud as we can so that you go, just look at when we were looking for apartments when we first got married, if there was a gym in the apartment building, it was amazing. Oh my God, they have a gym. And now it's like, it's standard, right? It's just standard part of your life. Everybody, and that takes time. And to understand that that's good for you in every single way. Exercising is good for you in every single way. And so hopefully it won't take that long for all the data to seep in the best, practices for closing the achievement gap. And so that's what I hope I can expedite by just shining a light.
I also do want to say that it comes into the international work as well, in the sense that there are best practices out there for international work. But I also think when you approach philanthropy in any way, but for us in particular internationally, there's a difference between kind of the idea of just giving, because you want to give and it feels good to give, but then responsible philanthropy. And responsible philanthropy really requires that you go in, you get a clear understanding of the situation, and we get that through our leaders because they have the buy-in of their communities, and they understand how the community works, they understand the culture of the community, and we understand what our giving will have an impact for. So if we decide to, give money for education, it may not work if we're not addressing all the obstacles to education. So we need to really have a full assessment of the situation, and then we need to measure impact. And that's how you do responsible philanthropy. You have the buy-in of the community, you have the buy-in of the leaders, you understand the culture, and you measure. So,
You mentioned that you approach this maybe a little bit differently because you're a woman. You also grew up in Hong Kong.
yes.
You have one of those lovely accents that it's hard to pinpoint where you're
I've
from. but
almost
it's
beat it
wonderful.
out of
He's
her,
not-
that
yeah.
accent.
I
Philly
kind of
accent.
say wooder.
Wooder
I
now.
do say wooder.
So close. Wooder.
I'm wondering how much having that perspective has shaped the work. Do you have a different approach to this than, say, the typical Philadelphian who says Wooder? Right.
I do think having an international upbringing has made me aware of the relativity of things and just how culture impacts the way we think and the choices that we make and the value systems that we have. So when we go out to, say, if I go out to the Samburu district in Kenya, and they have, a panel of elders that make a decision for their community, I need to be able to respect that and understand what that means. If I go out to Guatemala and see that, the fathers are reluctant to send their daughters to school, I need to be able to understand what that is and why that is, and not approach it with a judgmental
Cultural bias,
a
yeah.
cultural bias, and really try to understand where they're coming from in order to facilitate and be able to help them help their daughters in a better way. Well, actually, I'm not helping them, but just to, work with them. So I think that perspective of understanding that everything is relative and everything is valid, for a different person in a different situation, is the way that I like to try to approach it.
Well, again, it seems like it's trying to avoid that white band savior system. I will come in and tell you, impose something on you, as opposed
Right.
to helping you the other way around. So, Knight, you were quoted here earlier today. My colleague Patrick Kirkstra was interviewing William Haidt, the superintendent of Philadelphia schools, and he asked him a question something along the lines of, well, a lot of critics of Philadelphia schools say, aren't we just throwing good money after bad, that there's never, we've poured a lot of money down the drain over the years. And his response was interesting. He said, it makes me think of something that Night Shyamalan has said, which is simply that America is racist. And I'm wondering, as you did research for the book, as
Yeah.
you've looked more at schools, are you still holding to that idea, America is racist? Has your
Yeah.
thoughts evolved on this at all?
Yeah, no, that actually came from the data. That didn't come from me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I'll hold my opinion to myself. The data, again, the issue, and why I said that, I don't want to go into the whole speech on everything that I studied about schools and all that stuff, and it's hard not to as soon as I get going, but just to touch on it for a second, it's, ultimately you find when you look at the data that we've been looking at it flipped. We keep saying, what's wrong with those schools? What's wrong with that group? And there's nothing wrong with those schools. That's what the data says. It's what's outside those schools that is the issue. So if you took all those teachers and principals that are terrible in those schools failing and swap them with these incredible teachers and principals in the white suburban schools, just swap them like that, you get identical results. That's what the data says. It has nothing to do with them. This group is coming in with a different worldview, a different sense of agency, something they were taught that is so embedded in the United States. It's been embedded there for 300 years. It's been embedded. That's what they're walking in with. And that's what that group is very different. That's what needs to be overcome. If you pretend that that's not what's going on, you can't solve it. That's what the data says. If you pretend it's still 1960 and it's legal to be racist, it's legal, those schools that were closing the gap back then, they were doing a set of things. That's exactly what the data says you need to do today. It's the kids are coming in with the same kind of feeling that they are helpless, that this isn't for them, they are a lower quality person, All of those things that were told to them overtly are now whispered to them, just as powerfully. From everybody, from me making movies, from you with the magazine, we're all doing it without thinking. Do you know what I mean? When we go, oh, this will sell the magazine a little bit more, boom. When I go, oh, I can't have an African American lead because that'll mean X, Y, Z. That we do it 100 times over. They don't have the role models, they don't have the experiences. Even down to the vocabulary. It's a high-income white family speaks. It's something like 30 million more words per year to their kids. It's like it's an insane difference. It's just a very different thing that's going on. Even the kids that are African American who are achieving academically, they have to code switch when they go home so that they don't seem white, right? You know, intelligence is white and non-intelligence is white. That's what's been told. But now, obviously, none of us in this room believe that that's the truth. But when we pretend that that doesn't exist, you don't actually, the data is saying to you, it does exist. That racism is pervasive, and it's there. It's there in the families. It's there in the neighborhoods. It's there in everything they watch and they see. It's in the lack of, you know, stimuli and experiences that they're getting. It's everywhere. We've isolated this group. And so if you do the things that the data says to do, you're actually, in one generation, could finally do what the forefathers said once upon a time was possible.
When it comes to closing that education gap, do you see any signs of hope out there, things that you really latch onto and say, yes, this can work?
Yeah, no, you know, look, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's not only possible to close the achievement gap, you can create a gap the other way. You know, because the white suburban schools aren't the greatest in the world. That's they can outperform those kids. You can see it certainly. Like once upon a time, it was like you could just point to one teacher in the school, in some school somewhere, and say that teacher, he or she is amazing. And when the kids come in there, they gain 2 years of learning, and you know that one teacher is amazing. Then it suddenly became you could find many of those teachers, right? Examples of those. They were almost mythical, like unicorns. And then it became schools. My God, that school has closed the achievement gap. That school's closing the achievement gap. All the grades, everything. By the time they enter 3 grades behind, and by the time they're all graduating at higher than the national average, and they're going to college, blah, 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 blah. And then now you're seeing school systems doing it, that can do it. 7,000 kids, 8,000 kids, which is almost the average of a district in the United States now. So you're getting to the point where they're proven that you can do this on a scale at a school district level. So there's tons and tons of hope. And again, my job is to expedite the end game here as much as possible.
You guys have kids. I'm curious when it comes to the foundation or to philanthropy in general. What's the message that you give them about giving back or not? I mean,
this is almost a family argument because. I mean, I'm always I'm always the artist, you know. Oh my God, look at that! Look at the sunset! Look at that! You know, I'm that guy. Like, stop the car! And then she's, you know. So when we're talking, even with like, you know, our daughter just is going to Brown now, and I'll be like, ooh, take that poetry class, and then she'll be like, take that, you know, that UN class there. She's always coming at it from the side of, you know.
Our middle daughter now was just saying she might want to be. Documentary, if she's interested in documentary filmmaking, or in filmmaking. And I said, well, oh, you know, like when she said documentary, I said, oh, you could do documentary filmmaking, bring awareness to these causes. And she's like, well, I might also want to do fiction. Like, and I was like, but you know, the documentary filmmaking is really good. I had gone to the Clinton Global Initiative maybe 3-4 years ago. That's where I met Valentino for the first time. And I heard something that I don't remember the exact data, but I heard that if you want to create a sense of agency in children in terms of their own belief in their ability to make an impact and be agents of change, that you have to do it before they have to have these experiences that fit with that prior to the age of about 12 or 14. So really, that's really what creates. So I think that the earlier that we can start with our children and expose them to issues, I'm not one of the people that try to protect my kids from the horrors of the world. You know, maybe, I don't know, that's wrong, I don't know. But I want them to know what goes on out there. The foundation is just kind of a presence in the house, but we don't really jam it down their throats. It's there. Our daughter, the one who's interested in documentary filmmaking, she started a More Than Me Academy affiliate in her school, and that's the Katie Mila program in Liberia. You know, so I'm hoping that it kind of filters in, but I think the thing is early exposure. You make it a way of of life, that they see it from early on, that they are exposed to ideas, they're exposed to models, they're exposed to solutions, and they start thinking. And also the main thing I think is that driving in a sense of responsibility. It's each of our responsibilities. I don't think this is just about us, oh, maybe one day we'll do something good. I think it's our responsibility to actually be part of the solution, and to fight the injustices.
Let me finish up here by just asking you guys to look down the road 5 or 10 years, and just what do you hope for your own foundation in terms of where you want it to go?
Should I start? No.
Yeah.
Well, I'll talk more amorphously. The thing that's hardest.
Well, you're an artist because you have to then, yes.
Yeah. It probably is that. Well, no, this is more about my personality in particular, that the hardest thing about philanthropy for me is you're just part of something. And there's no real end game here in your lifetime. Do you know what I mean? You can open a school or do something like that, and that you can focus in on, but then you've kind of lost sight a little bit, I think. I have to get more comfortable with the idea of I just contribute, to let's say it's about education, just contribute and be okay with that. Whereas I'm so much of a goal-oriented guy, get the script done, get this, get on the budget, this, we want to get this, want to start a TV show, whatever it is. This is harder. It's more like you just have to be part of a community. And that's, egoless, to some extent. Offer what you can offer and then sit back. And so to think about what can happen, you immediately say that, and I immediately have like the click, checklist of like, I want this, I want that to happen. But really probably the best thing I can be is, as active as I can be in my side of it, the education side of it. And I'm sure I have more specific.
Yeah, I have a different kind of thing, because when you do think about the big problems, if I think about, human slavery and trafficking, me alone, us alone, maybe we're not going to solve that. But we can support somebody who's working with a girl in Liberia, getting her off the streets, putting her in school, making sure she's fed, making sure she's safe, and giving her a real chance. And you can do that, with multiple kids or multiple individuals and make change that way. So, yeah, I think when we first started, we had these grand ideas. We really, I want to solve the problem of poverty. We want to fix the school systems. We wish we could have solved everything, but I think it's worth it to, even if it's one child. And we're already doing that. We're doing that with many, and there are people out there doing that with many, and if we can support them, we're making a difference.
I think one more practical thing, I think, as we're shifting right now, again, as I mentioned, I primarily felt like, hey, look, I'll just give the money, you guys find the things, and we'll do that way. And it has limited us in terms of we've gotten to the point now where we can do a lot more than what I was willing to give each year and do, all of those things. And so we've just started to open up into a different frame of thinking, which is to shine a light on these people and raise money to kind of do the things that everybody is doing, to let's say for example, like for Philadelphia, for these tenants that the book talks about, and for our school system, if we had a certain amount of money, I could go bring all the people from the country that are doing this kind of work to Philly, recruit them, bring them here, and make this like the incubator, ground zero of all the greatest innovations, and but that requires more effort and time and more people and strategies and this and that kind of thing. And that's one part of our stuff, and we can expand. So we started just now doing kind of events to raise money. I'll probably have premier charity stuff and all stuff. We had our first event, which was a big Halloween party. By the way, besides philanthropy, we party really hard. And we combined those two great skills together in a party, and we got Tom drunk. It was fantastic. It was
First shot of tequila I've done since I was 21. So I'm still hungover.
Our tagline is "Be bad, do good." So.
A fitting way to end. Thank you very much for being with us. We've actually, we've come to the end of, I think, of a pretty amazing day. I just want to thank everyone involved in this, including the Philly Mag staff and the Drexel staff that helped put this together, our sponsors, all of our presenters and speakers, and most especially you guys for being here. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope we get to see you next year.